It is a real privilege to get to open this event, and I hope that by the end of our time together, we are all going to feel more like ancestors than we do at the start. So we are going to have an expansive time. We are going to travel back 4.6 billion years. We are going to travel far forwards into the future. And ultimately, we are going to fully occupy this space between the past and the future that we will be in together for the next few days. But before we dive into all of that, I thought it would be useful to do a little bit of why. Like, why me? Why this? Why now? So, why me? One of the things I do is direct the Long Time Project, and our work is all about cultivating cultures of stewardship at scale. What that means is we help individuals and institutions be good ancestors. And we do that through working with policymakers, through working with arts organisations, broadcasters, and working directly with the podcast via things like our podcast. So that's why I'm here. That's one version of why I'm here. I'm going to tell you another a bit later. But perhaps more importantly, why is this question important now? Why should we be thinking about what it means to be a good ancestor? Now, there are two answers to this question. One is strategic and one is existential. So the strategic answer to this question is that actually the value of stewardship is one of the few values that cuts across political divides. People on the left and on the right generally want to take care of the living things they love. So if we want to mobilize people at scale, stewardship is a very good place to start. But the more existential answer to this question can be answered in this diagram. So in the middle, the green dot shows us, all of us currently alive, all 7.7 billion of us. On the right, we have got all of the humans who've lived over the past 50,000 years. That's 100 billion. And then on the left, in this orange, big circle, we have all of the potential humans who could live over the next 50,000 years. And this is just humans. Like, imagine how big that orange circle would be if it was all species on this planet. And those of us alive right now get to determine the quality of lives of all of those future beings, and ultimately whether they will have lives at all. It is an insane and awesome responsibility to have. And the reason that we have that is because of this field called existential risk. So whilst in many moments in history, humans have been capable of vast destruction at scale, that destruction has never threatened us as a species level. Then over the last century, we've become pretty good at finding new ways to potentially destroy ourselves as a species, via things like climate change, biodiversity loss, AI, biological warfare, pandemics. And so we find ourselves in this situation where we suddenly have this disproportionate amount of responsibility for all future life. And what that means is that we have to start to step into this question of what it means to be a good ancestor. And yet, it is hard to do in this moment because in these polycrises that we face, it becomes easier to hunker down than to step back and to look at the horizon. This quote from Mark Carney when he was at the Bank of England talks about climate change as a tragedy of the horizon. He talks about the catastrophic impacts of climate change being felt beyond the traditional horizons of most actors. Now, in the intervening 8 years, I think we can all agree that the catastrophic impacts of climate change are very visible to us. And yet we also know that this is just going to be the start unless we can turn the ship around fast enough. And so, what we are going to spend our time doing here is a high-intensity time workout. Now, has anyone in the room done a HIIT workout before? A normal HIIT workout? Okay, great. So for all of you who didn't put your hands up, do not worry. What we are about to do is going to look nothing like a traditional HIIT workout. We are not going to be strengthening our pecs, but rather our perspectives. And the reason that we are going to be Jane Fondering our way into the future is because being a good ancestor is like a muscle. It is a muscle that needs strengthening in different ways. And so that is what we are going to do. And like all good HIIT workouts, there are circuits. So welcome everyone to circuit 1. This is a circuit about intergenerational empathy. And in this circuit, you are all going to be doing some work, albeit quite gentle work. For the next 5 minutes, we're going to be doing a reflective exercise. And so I invite you to close your eyes, or if you'd prefer, to bring your gaze down and look at the floor. Take a moment maybe to shuffle in your seat, get a bit comfortable. Start to feel the ground, the support of the ground underneath your feet, and the air above your head, and feeling the breath moving in and out of you. And now I invite you to bring to mind an older person that you've cared about. Someone of your grandparents' generation. It could be a grandparent, it could be a great aunt or uncle or another older person who you've cared about. And bring into your mind's eye a quality that they have that evokes warmth in you. It could be their smile, it could be a dimple that they had, something that made them laugh. A quality that they have or had that evoked warmth in you. And now in your mind's eye, you're going to take one step backwards and you're stepping back through time to when that person is 40. Take a moment to connect with them through that characteristic that evokes warmth in you. How is it present in them at 40? And then in your mind's eye, stepping back one more step to this person's 9th birthday party. Again, connect with that characteristic that evokes warmth in you. How is it present in them at 9? Now, what is happening at this party? Where in the world is it? What kind of food are they eating? Who else is there? Take a moment to be in this celebration. And now, turning your back on the party and walking over to a window, take a look at the world back then. What do you see out of the window? What was the world like? What are the buildings like outside the window? What nature can you see? Take a moment to connect with the past. And now you turn back to the party. Take a moment to drink it all in before you say your farewells. And in your mind's eye, you step forward one step through the generations and another step to arrive back in this moment in June 2023. Take a breath, feeling the support of the ground under you. And let the image of that person you've had in your mind fade. Now I invite you to think of a young person that you care about. It could be a child, a grandchild, niece, nephew, the offspring of friends, a younger person that you care about. And again, connect with a characteristic they have that evokes warmth in you. It could be their smile, their dimple, the funny habit that they have. And in your mind's eye, step forward one step through the generations. And imagine this person at 40. How is that characteristic that evokes warmth in you now present in them at 40? And now in your mind's eye, stepping forward one more step, arriving at this person's 90th birthday party. Again, taking a moment to connect with that quality that evokes warmth in you. Is it still present in them at 90? And now turning your attention to this celebration, imagining who might be there celebrating this person you care about when they hit 90. Perhaps imagining what they might be eating. What does this party look and feel like? And again, now walking over to a window and for a moment turning your back on the party and looking out to the world. When is this party happening? It's likely that it's going to be at the end of this century, perhaps the start of the next one. What does the world look like then? What is happening outside of the window? You hear a noise from the party. Someone is tapping their glass and you turn your back to face the celebration again. And you notice that this person who is celebrating their 90th is tapping their glass to give a speech. And then you notice that there is a photo of you on the table. And the person celebrating their 90th asks everybody in the room to raise their glass to you, to thank you for something that you've done that's made their world better. What are they toasting you for? Take a few breaths to connect with your legacy. Now it's time to take your leave, to say your farewells, and to leave this party in the future. In your mind's eye, you step back one step through the generations and another to arrive back here, June 2023. Again, letting the image of that person fade from your mind's eye. Feeling the support of the ground beneath you and the space of the air above you. And when you're ready, gently blinking your eyes open again. So, you've just time traveled about 200 years. That can bring up things for people. And so for the next few minutes, we're going to have time to talk in pairs about what came up for you in that exercise. I invite you to talk to someone you haven't yet met, so that might involve turning round in your seat or moving. We're just going to take a couple of minutes. You'll have a couple of minutes, or have a couple of minutes each to share with each other what came up for you, maybe how that felt, and maybe what you saw. And I will let you know when that time is up. So feel free to discuss. Okay, everybody, we are done with this bit. I love that you want to keep talking about intergenerational empathy. There will be plenty more, there will be many more opportunities for you to continue these conversations. So the process that you just did, this process we call human layers, was partly inspired by the work of an ecologist, Joanna Macy, and partly inspired by an experience I had about 8 years ago with my nephew, Finley. So he is now 10 and really into Warhammer and Minecraft, but back then, when he was 2, he was really into doors. Like any doors, bathroom doors, shower doors, front doors, cupboard doors. And the reason that this is relevant is because one day I was looking after him and he was playing with a door, and it was so on brand that I didn't really think about it. And he was playing with the door of a really, really big cupboard. At the time, I was reading an article about climate change. And it was one of those articles that I'm sure we've all read that talks about some of the most terrifying scenarios for the end of this century. And then I heard a noise and I looked up, and my tiny nephew was about to pull this massive cupboard on top of him. So I kind of threw the article down, I rushed over, pushed up the cupboard, scooped him up. He started screaming at the injustice of being taken away from the best game in the universe. And to both of our surprises, I started to cry. Because in that moment, I suddenly realized that he would likely be there in this future I was reading about, and that I was not going to be there to scoop him up from danger. Now, I'd already been working on climate for about a decade at that point, but in that moment, something shifted for me. And now I know I was experiencing something called intergenerational empathy. But it was new. It was very new to me. But it's not a new idea. It's a very ancient idea. And if I had grown up in one of many indigenous cultures, it would not have taken me until I was in my 30s to experience it. So this is a quote from the great law of the Iroquois Confederacy, written down in the 1800s, but predating that by many, many generations. Look and listen for the welfare of the people, the whole people, and have always in view not only the past and present, but also the coming generations, even those whose faces are yet beneath the surface of the ground, the unborn of the future nation. The unborn of the future nation. Now, I could have also quoted Aboriginal thought, Maori thought, Quechua thought. This kind of thinking, stewardship, care for the future, is built into so many indigenous cultures. And in a conversation that I had with Aboriginal activist, academic, artist Tyson Yunkaporta, he talked about humans as a custodial species. And he said that's often not how we talk about ourselves. In fact, at the moment, I'm sure we've all heard the conversation that we humans are part of the problem, that perhaps we don't deserve to be here, that perhaps once we wipe ourselves out, it will be better for the planet. And we've even named this epoch, the Anthropocene, anthro, after human, as if it was all humans that were causing this. And yet that's not true. It is a particular culture, it is a particular economic system that is causing this unparalleled destruction. But it is not humans per se. It is not something intrinsically human to dominate and destroy nature. And that's what Tyson was telling me. And he had this amazing turn of phrase, which never made it into the podcast, but I adore. And he said, maybe we are at a janitorial moment as a species. Maybe right now it is our job to clean the toilets, to brush the corridors, to keep the lights on for our species. And what does it mean to have that kind of humility when it comes to caring for future generations? So very practically, given that this is the Intergenerational Empathy circuits, what are some things that you can do to take these ideas away straight away? Well, a few years ago, we did work with policymakers all over the world to co-design a set of very simple tools that you can use to bring these ideas into your organizations. And a very simple one is the empty chair for future generations. So from next week, you could put a chair in your meetings to represent future generations. You can refer to that chair when decisions are made. You can start including the unborn into your decision making. So, congratulations, we've all made it through the first circuit. Circuit 2 is deep time. So, traditionally when we talk about deep time, this kind of image is shared, and I never know what to do with this kind of image. I'm like, it's confusing, and how do we even get our head around 4.6 billion years? So there are some tools out there. I really recommend doing a deep time walk if you haven't already listened to the app. We've got a well of deep time, which is a practice you can do. And these are all about traveling the 4.6 billion years of our history. But today we're going to take a slightly different look at deep time. One inspired by this quote by Brian Eno. And in it he says, "I'm more and more convinced that our only hope of saving our planet is if we begin to have different feelings about it. Perhaps if we became re-enchanted by the amazing improbability of life." Now, the more deep time work I do, the more this resonates, the more I am bowled over by how improbable life on Earth is. And so I'm going to share two particular moments of deep history that have blown me away when it comes to this. So the first happened 4.5 billion years ago. And this space snooker image is very much an imagined representation of what might have happened. So the big planet you see here is Earth. And the smaller planet you see is a planet that collided into us. So at the time, Earth was unrecognizable. It was a rolling, molten globe careening through space. And then this huge planet the size of Mars crashes into us, and there's an explosion. All this molten rock comes out, and one of those spurts of molten rock solidifies into the moon. Now, because the planet that bumped into us had iron in it, the moon also has iron in it, as does the Earth. And so the Earth and the moon become locked together into the magnetic relationship that we now have. And what that did, that magnetism stabilized Earth, and that stability of Earth was essential for life to thrive. It would not have been possible for life to thrive on that rolling ball. And it's nuts. I mean, what if that planet hadn't bumped into us? What if it had bumped into us at a different angle? What if the molten Earth had come out at a different angle and not congealed together to form the moon? We would not have had life on this planet. And so I'll fast forward a few billion years to a time in history which scientists call the boring billion. And they call it the boring billion because for a billion years, nothing really happens. With this kind of smelly, soupy, slimy Earth, there is no complex life. And scientists posit that during this time, complex life was trying and failing to establish. It was trying and failing for a billion years. And then they posit that something happened. The tectonic plates probably shifted a little bit, the climate changed a bit, and suddenly the conditions for life were ripe. And so we had what we know as the history of life on this planet, from lichen to T-Rexes to us. But it took 1 billion years of trying and failing to get there. And for me, when I start to understand more about the deep past of our planet, it really brings to mind this incredibly poignant paragraph from the very end of Bewilderment, a novel by Richard Powers. Now, this isn't a spoiler, and I really recommend you read the book if you haven't. But particularly the last bit of this sentence, where he talks about the all-over song of endless solutions signing the air of a changing world that by every calculation ought never to have been. A world that by every calculation ought never to have been. This world is a scientific miracle. And for me, this work around deep time is connected to what it means to be a good ancestor. There is this potential to do as Brian Eno invites, and look at how can we be re-enchanted by how improbable this extraordinary world that we get to call home is. So, that is the end of that circuit. You will be relieved to hear you're well over halfway through your HIIT workout. Do hydrate if you haven't been. The final circuit is about cathedral thinking. Now, as people who think about the built environment, these ideas might be familiar to you. Cathedral thinking refers to those cathedrals that took many generations to build. The people who laid the first stone would not have been around to see its completion. And as a term, it refers to the projects that we are all involved in that are bigger than our lifetimes. What are those cathedral projects that all of us are involved in? What does it mean to have colleagues who haven't been born yet? We've developed a set of legacy questions to help you explore these ideas. Please do take a screenshot. Sadly, we don't have time to dive into this now. But what we're doing here is we're really looking backwards. We're thinking about who are the ancestors, whose work are we building on, what did they leave for us to enable us to do the work that we're doing today? And who are the people who we're going to hand the baton on to who haven't been born yet? What resources do we want to leave for them to make their work easier, more powerful? And what does it open up to think of ourselves as being involved, as being part of these long intergenerational lineages of change? What is it to know that we will not see the results of our work fully in our lifetimes? And this work of thinking in this way is very Janus-based. And for me, I think that is one of the qualities of being a good ancestor. It is about looking backwards, yes, back 4.6 billion years, but also back to understand how we got the systems that make it very hard to be a good ancestor that we live in today. How did these systems that have contributed to the problems we're facing come into be? And then we need to look forward to the future, to look at what are those life-giving regenerative systems that you are all working on. What do they look like? How do we make them real? And there's this wonderful idea from the thinker Adrienne Marie Brown, and she talked about this when I spoke to her for the podcast. And she said, imagine if human history is like the Grand Canyon, and the different systems that we live in over time are like strata in this Grand Canyon. How is it to imagine the destructive systems that we've been living in as strata, as artifact, as history? And that on top of those strata will be the regenerative, life-giving systems that all of us are working on today. And for me, I find that very helpful to imagine how we retire some of those systems that we need to, so that they just become strata in the Grand Canyon of human history. So, we have come to the end of the workout. We are now in the cool down phase. Feel free to stretch your mind. You can, if you have space, stretch your muscles. And whilst you do that, know that through being a good ancestor, you are part of a growing global movement. That this is happening across politics with things like the groundbreaking Wellbeing for Future Generations Act in Wales, where for the first time in the world, all public bodies now have to take future generations into account when they make decisions. It's happening in the courts. We're seeing increasingly courts legislating on behalf of young people, suing governments, suing companies for destroying their futures. We're seeing it happening in the field of finance, whether it's through ideas like donut economics or through movements like the Good Ancestor movement about values-led wealth stewardship. So through being a good ancestor, through growing and cultivating this muscle within us, we are not alone. We are part of a movement. And so, that is me done. I hope that you feel more connected to yourself as a good ancestor. This is kind of like a lifelong inquiry. And the one thing I've learned through my immersion in this space is it really is a muscle. And that there are a multiplicity of ways to exercise it. I've just explained 3 today, but there are many more, and I'm hoping you will discover more and come back and tell me about it. It has been a real privilege to get to have this time with you. So I thank you for your attention, but I also thank you for all that you are doing for the unborn. And I know that they would thank you too, if they could. So, thank you.